The road to the mill wasn't even marked on most maps anymore. It curved off the main highway like it had been forgotten on purpose, narrow, cracked, half swallowed by weeds that had long since claimed the edges. Mara Ellison followed it anyway. Her car wasn't built for roads like this. The suspension groaned with every dip, every loose stone kicking up beneath the tires. But she didn't slow down. She couldn't afford to. At 19, with $10 left in her account and nowhere else to go, slowing down wasn't an option anymore. The first time she saw the mill, she almost missed it. It didn't announce itself. No sign. No clear entrance. Just a long, low stone structure sitting beside a narrow stream, its walls weathered into a dull gray, its roof sagging slightly in the middle like it had been holding its breath for decades. A massive wooden water wheel stood beside it, half submerged in the slow-moving current. It didn't turn. It hadn't turned in years. Mara pulled the car to a stop and sat there for a moment, engine idling. "This is it," she murmured. The listing had been vague. Former wool mill. Auction property. Sold as is. She'd expected bad. But this was something else. 3 days earlier, she had been sitting on the floor of a bus station with her backpack as a pillow. 2 days earlier, she had spent her last real money on gas. 1 day earlier, she had walked into a county office just to get out of the heat and saw the notice pinned to a corkboard. Public auction, delinquent properties. Most people walked past it. Mara stopped. The room at the auction had been louder than she expected. Not crowded, but loud. People talking, laughing, bidding on land and storage units like it was a game. She didn't belong there. Everyone else seemed to know what they were doing. She didn't even understand half the terms being used. Then the mill came up. Lot 22. Former textile property. Rural location. Minimum bid, $10. A few people chuckled. One man shook his head. "Place is a money pit," someone muttered. "Roof's probably gone," another added. "No road access worth a damn," a third voice said. The auctioneer barely looked up. $10. Any bids? Mara didn't plan to raise her hand. She didn't think. She didn't calculate. She just did it. $10. The auctioneer repeated. Silence. No one else moved. Going once, going twice. The gavel hit. Sold. And just like that, she owned a mill. Now, standing in front of it, Mara stepped out of the car and shut the door behind her. The quiet hit immediately. No traffic. No voices. Just the low, steady sound of water moving past the wheel. She walked closer, boots crunching softly on gravel. The building smelled faintly of damp wood and stone. Old. Not rotten, but neglected. The front door was heavy, wood reinforced with rusted metal bands. She pulled it open with both hands. It resisted at first, then gave with a deep, echoing creak. Inside, the air was cooler. Dim light filtered through narrow windows, cutting thin lines across the floor. Dust hung in the beams, undisturbed. The space was massive, bigger than she expected. Long rows of old machinery stretched across the room. Spinning frames, looms, belts and pulleys that hadn't moved in decades. Everything was still, frozen in time. Mara stepped inside slowly. Her footsteps echoed. "This could work," she said quietly. She wasn't sure she believed it yet, but she needed to. She moved deeper into the mill, brushing her fingers along one of the machines. Cold metal. Solid. Not completely ruined. "If I clean it, fix some of this," she muttered. She didn't finish the thought. There were too many unknowns. The main floor led to several smaller rooms branching off along the side. Storage areas, workspaces, and one room at the far end, marked by a faded sign barely clinging to the wall. Dye room. Mara paused. Something about the door felt different. Not dramatic. Just heavier. She pushed it open. The smell hit first. Not unpleasant. Just strong. Faint traces of old dyes. Earthy, chemical, lingering even after all these years. The room itself was smaller than the main floor, but still spacious. Large vats lined one wall. Wooden tables sat in the center, stained with years of use. Shelving units held old jars, some empty, some still sealed. Mara stepped inside, looking around. This must have been where they colored everything, she said to herself. She walked toward one of the vats, running her hand along the rim. The surface was worn smooth from years of work. Then she noticed something. The floor. Near the back wall, the wooden planks didn't match the rest. Slightly newer. Slightly different color. Mara crouched down. Why would they replace just this section? She tapped it lightly. Hollow. Her pulse quickened. That's not original, she murmured. She stood, scanning the room again. Everything else looked untouched. Aged evenly. Consistent. Except that spot. Mara grabbed one of the metal tools lying nearby, a rusted pry bar, and returned to the planks. This is probably a bad idea, she muttered. But she knelt down anyway. The wood resisted at first. Old nails held it in place. But after a few careful pulls, it shifted. A sharp crack echoed through the room. The plank lifted slightly. Mara froze, listening. Nothing moved. Nothing reacted. She pulled again. The board came loose. Beneath it, darkness. A space. Not deep. Not a tunnel. But a concealed compartment built between the floor supports. Mara leaned closer, heart pounding. Inside, a metal box. Rectangular. Heavy-looking. Unlabeled. Okay, she whispered. She reached down and pulled it out. It scraped slightly against the wood as it came free. The box was cold. Solid. Locked. Mara turned it over in her hands. No markings. No obvious way to open it. Of course it's locked, she said under her breath. She set it on one of the tables and looked around for something to break it open. The room felt different now. Not threatening. Just charged. Like she had crossed a line she couldn't uncross. Mara grabbed a heavier tool, a small hammer, and returned to the table. Last chance to walk away, she muttered. She didn't walk away. She struck the lock. Once. Twice. On the third hit, it snapped. The metal latch broke clean off. Mara hesitated for just a second. Then, she lifted the lid. Inside, stacks of paper, neatly organized, wrapped in old cloth. Mara blinked. That's it. She pulled one bundle out and unwrapped it. Documents. Handwritten notes. Receipts. Ledger entries. Her brow furrowed. This wasn't random. It was organized. Detailed. Very detailed. She flipped through the pages. Dates. Names. Quantities. Then, numbers. Large numbers. Much larger than anything a small rural mill should have been dealing with. Mara's expression shifted. This doesn't make sense, she said quietly. She dug deeper into the box. More documents. More records. Then, a map. Folded. Carefully preserved. She opened it. Her eyes scanned the lines. The markings. And then, she froze. The map didn't just show the mill. It showed routes. Hidden routes. Paths through the hills. Connections to nearby towns that didn't exist on modern maps anymore. Mara's grip tightened slightly. This wasn't just a mill, she whispered. She looked back at the documents. At the numbers. At the shipments recorded in careful detail. Wool. Dyes. But also, other items. Unlisted goods. Marked only by symbols. Her mind started putting the pieces together. Slowly. Carefully. This place was moving something else, she said. And whatever it was, it had been important enough to hide. Very well. Mara sat back slightly, the reality settling in. This wasn't just an abandoned property. It was part of something bigger. Something no one had talked about. Something that had been buried. On purpose. She looked down at the documents again. Then at the open floor. Then around the room. Her voice dropped to a whisper. What did you actually buy? The answer wasn't clear yet. But one thing was certain. This mill wasn't worthless. Not even close. Mara didn't move for a long moment. The open box sat in front of her. Papers spread across the table. The lifted floorboards still exposing the hidden compartment beneath. Nothing about it felt random anymore. This wasn't someone hiding a few valuables. This was planned. Systematic. Careful. She picked up the map again. This time, she studied it properly. The routes weren't rough sketches. They were precise. Distances marked. Turns noted. Even elevation changes written in small, neat handwriting. Whoever made this knew the land intimately. Her eyes followed one of the routes outward from the mill. It curved along the stream, then split into two paths, one leading toward the nearest town, the other disappearing into a stretch of hills that no longer had any official roads. Mara leaned back slightly. Hidden transport routes, she murmured. She grabbed one of the ledgers and flipped through it again, this time more carefully. At first glance, it looked like standard mill records. Raw wool in, dyed wool out. But layered between those entries were others. Sure codes. Symbols. Quantities that didn't match the scale of the business. She traced one entry with her finger. A date. A symbol. A number. Then she flipped to the next page. Same symbol. Same pattern. It's not random, she said. She stood abruptly and walked back out into the main floor, scanning the old machinery again. Her eyes landed on the large water wheel outside through the window, then back to the machines. This place wasn't just processing wool, she said slowly. It was covering something else. She walked toward one of the larger spinning frames and crouched beside it. The base looked heavier than necessary. Reinforced. She tapped it lightly. Solid. Then she noticed a small panel, flush with the frame, nearly invisible under years of dust. Mara wiped it clean with her sleeve. There it was. A seam. Her pulse quickened again. She grabbed a screwdriver and pried at the edge. The panel popped loose. Inside, another compartment, smaller than the one in the dye room, but packed. Metal cylinders. Uniform. Carefully stacked. Mara picked one up. Heavier than it looked. She unscrewed the cap slowly. Inside, not fabric, not dye, tightly rolled documents. She pulled one out and unrolled it. Blueprints. Detailed mechanical drawings. Complex designs for machinery, far more advanced than anything in the mill itself. Mara frowned. This isn't textile equipment. She checked another cylinder. More blueprints. Different designs. Different structures. All labeled with names she didn't recognize. Her mind shifted gears. This wasn't smuggling goods, she said. It was moving information. She stood slowly, looking around the mill with new clarity. A remote location. Hidden routes. Legitimate business on the surface. It was the perfect cover. Someone had used this place to move sensitive industrial designs. Quietly. Off the record, away from scrutiny. Mara exhaled slowly. Illegal, but organized, she said. She returned to the table in the dye room, spreading the documents out again. Now that she understood what she was looking at, the patterns were obvious. Dates matched the blueprints. Symbols corresponded to specific shipments. Routes aligned with delivery points. It was a full operation. And then, she noticed something else. At the bottom of one ledger page. A final entry. No symbol. No route. Just a note. Operation closed. All materials secured on site. Mara's eyes widened slightly. On site. She looked around the room again. The box she found. The hidden panel. If those were just parts, then the rest had to still be here. She stood quickly and moved back into the main floor. This time, she wasn't wandering. She was searching. She checked along the walls, under platforms, behind storage racks. Then, near the far end of the building, she found it. A reinforced section of flooring. Subtle, but deliberate. Mara knelt down and pressed against it. It didn't budge. She scanned the surrounding area and spotted a metal latch embedded in the side of a support beam. Hidden, but accessible if you knew where to look. Her heart pounded. She pulled it. A heavy click echoed beneath her. The force shifted. Slowly, a large rectangular section lifted upward, revealing a storage vault. Not huge, but packed. Crates. Sealed. Labeled only with numbers. Mara climbed down carefully. The air was dry, preserved. She opened the nearest crate. Inside, more cylinders. Dozens of them. Each one filled with blueprints. Records. Designs. Years' worth of material. Mara sat back on her heels, stunned. This is everything, she whispered. Not scraps. Not leftovers. The entire archive. Whoever ran this operation hadn't taken it with them. They'd hidden it. And never came back. Mara climbed out of the vault slowly, her mind already moving ahead. This wasn't just interesting. It wasn't just historical. It was valuable. Very valuable. She pulled out her phone and hesitated for a moment. Then, she searched. Industrial patent databases. Old engineering firms. Manufacturing archives. One by one, she cross-referenced the names on the blueprints. Some companies still existed. Others had been absorbed. Some designs had never been officially filed, which meant they were still unclaimed. Mara lowered the phone slowly. This is legal leverage, she said quietly. Not stolen goods. Not something she needed to hide, but something she could prove ownership of. Because it had been abandoned on property she legally purchased. She sat down on the edge of the workbench, letting the realization settle. She didn't just buy a mill. She bought an archive of unregistered industrial designs. And that meant she had options. Real ones. Over the next few weeks, Mara worked methodically. She cataloged everything. Photographed documents. Organized records. Then, she contacted a legal consultant. Not to sell immediately, but to verify. To protect herself. The process took time. But the conclusion was clear. The materials were abandoned assets. No active claims. No disputes.